Although I'm not a pet owner at the moment, I'm glad to say that we are bringing back a First Side Chat. That's right, that's the show that we had on earlier that was definitely around pets and pet care and all in that kind of space. And I had the pleasure of talking to Judith Texier with the Crisis Dog Organization, and she was saying that they would like to definitely help us bring it back. So we were glad to have that conversation to bring back the First Side Chat so we can learn about our furry animals and our good friends. We were actually having a conversation on our news show because somebody was trying to make the argument that you don't really grieve when pets go and all in that space and that they aren't as important as some of our human folks and all in that kind of argument. And I know that Jacoby, who is a dog owner and has his two kids, was actually making an argument against that in that space. And that was on our news show that recently took place on Monday through Friday, and I think that that was either the Wednesday or the Thursday edition that that whole conversation came up. And as I was thinking about it, a lot of times when we are having those first dealings with grieving, it is actually over those pets that we have lost, and sometimes that is even before you have lost the first human in your life as well. So a lot of times they are more human than we like to give them credit for, and I know that I miss doing that whole pet sitting for Millie. Millie was the cat that I pet sitted for, and definitely enjoyed that. And definitely Millie moved over to the country because we found out that Millie, well, but we found out a couple of things about Millie. One, we found out that Millie was actually a girl cat when we thought it was a boy cat. So there was a whole gender kind of confusion going on with Millie and all in that space. And Millie was definitely a Roman cat. So Millie definitely liked to roam around and go in all of that space. So Millie was definitely Roman, and it was just determined that it would be better for Millie to go live with the country relatives and all in that space. But Louis is still upstairs, even though Louis is about to have to make a move as well because his owners, my upstairs neighbors, are getting ready to move, and when they move, they will be taking Louis with them. So I'm not sure how Louis will adapt to that move, but I'll bring Judith in, and maybe Judith can talk about how sometimes pets are definitely are part of our family. That was what I was bringing up in that opening monologue and all in that space. And definitely there can also be some gender confusion with certain pets and all along those lines. And like I said, that was definitely the case with Millie. And I'm looking forward to seeing how Louis adopts because I do know that they're going to move, I think, to a house this time around as they are both well, one just graduated from college, one of the owners, and the other one has been working in the car industry, I think as a mechanic. But they will be moving hopefully to a house, if not another apartment, and Louis will have to make that move with them. Louis is a very big dog. I think it's like a pit or at least a part pit mix and all along those lines. But he's very friendly because every time I come back to my apartment, Louis is trying to find a stick to get me to throw it with him and all in that space. So Louis is definitely a friendly animal and all along those lines. So I see you've got some amazing guests that you want to bring on and share some of their thoughts and some of their conversation. But I'm glad that we were able to bring back the First Side Chat because, as I told you before, one of the owners, I can't remember if Kimberly has a particular pet at the moment, even though she's got her son. I think she's got multiple kids and all of that. But definitely Nick Palvedo, one of our founders, has Tilly, and Tilly is always around, and that's a smaller dog, but is always around nearby him, even when he is doing his shows and when he's doing his work in the pension attorney field as well. So Tilly
Well, Mark,
is
thank
definitely
you
a
for
dear part of
inviting
the
us.
family.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us. I just want to say a little bit about Crisis Dogs.
Please.
We rescue dogs from situations in which their lives are at risk, and that would be kill shelters. And most shelters in North Carolina are kill shelters, from chains, from hoarders, and from abusive domestic situations. Um, Last year, we rescued 562 dogs, and except for those dogs we put into foster, we have about 12 dogs in hospice. In hospice, we provided foster homes, full medical care, and transport by land or air because we work with Pilots and Paws to adopters all along the East Coast. So that's 564 dogs last year, and we're hoping definitely to go beyond 700 this year. Um, when I met Tracy, we talk about training. It's like, oh, that's really boring. But the fact is, The dogs that we have rescued were largely, dumped, given up by owners, ending up in the shelter because of some um, behavior problem. The dogs might have been barking often, or they could not be walked, or they could not be house trained. Some are wonderful, ready to go pets, but some have problems. And if a trainer had intervened, the dog would be with the family. So I've invited for our first guest, the first show, Tracy Oliveto. She is what's called a balanced dog trainer. She is the founder and the director of Butch and Sundance in Raleigh. And we call her our super trainer because when we have dogs that really need training to save their lives, we call on Tracy. We're going to have also two crisis dogs adopters who we sent over to Tracy and who Tracy turned their life around. Really, we talk about miracles, but it's really, these dogs have gone from often a hellish situation or a situation in which they, um, we're looking at being put down, and they're living happily and very domestically with their new owners, thanks to Tracy. So I want to introduce Tracy. Tracy, tell us a little bit what balanced training is. I know there are a lot of really bad trainers out there who have done a lot of damage, and we're happy to find you. So tell us the difference between your training and other trainers.
So I wanted to say right up front that I have learned about all the different methods of training. I couldn't even count them at this point. I got my first dog right out of college and started working closely with a trainer back in Minnesota. No, but there weren't names for styles or methods of training then. And like you said, Jude, it wasn't really fashionable or trendy to train your dog. So we were all the dog geeks that just wanted to find out how to train our dogs. And I ended up working with the teacher was a former canine police officer. And so I feel very lucky because I was exposed very early to a type of training that was very leadership based, because as we know, the dogs, the canine dogs, they rely on the leadership and relationship with that officer to know what to do and what not to do and how to manage situations that are otherwise overwhelming and frightening. So there wasn't any really talk of that, but I found out quite a bit later that she was a former canine officer. So then I did some really wonderful things. I worked 2 years with her back then to train two of my dogs. And then I moved to North Carolina and I adopted a couple more dogs. In fact, I ended up with 6 about 3 months after I landed here, because there were a lot of stray dogs that I was collecting back then. And I looked for trainers to now just kind of continue my education. And what I found is that there still was no system or philosophy that was talked about. It was mostly about using food to ask for something and reward with the food. And I just found that I didn't have the same success. I tried probably 7 different people over a few years. And then I finally found someone. I started just doing more research for someone that was training like the way I was first introduced, because that.
Let me just interject also, because a lot of trainers use the shock collars, and we get calls from people all the time saying, the dogs are worse after training with these collars.
Mm-hmm. So it's shock collars have now changed. Back in the day, they literally were shock collars. They're now e-collars, electric collars, but they're TENS technology, which is what we use for massage tool technology, or what your chiropractor uses to move your muscles in a healing way. So it's completely different now. So I remember being introduced to shock collars, or finding out about them rather, in the training world way back then, and it was a hard no. But more recently, it's changed. The methods have changed. The technology has changed. But you're right. The old way of training with shock collars can just cause fear and confusion.
Hey, Tracy, I was just wondering because you mentioned earlier being from the Minneapolis area, and I am a diehard and have been all my life Vikings fan. Don't ask me why, because I'm a North Carolina native and all in that space, but definitely have been a diehard fan of that particular team. But I'm imagining, having gone to school in the Midwest, that there are some things with training that might be different from the cold weather states like Minnesota and Wisconsin to the warmer weather areas like here in North Carolina and South Carolina and other places. I was just wondering if maybe you could talk about some of the differences that exist in the training from one climate to another.
Mm-hmm. I actually, now with the internet, that's gone away. I think that was probably true then, and that's why I moved here. And there was just a different cultural trend going on here towards food reward training only. And so I think that was true regionally, but now that's sort of all been a melting pot now. So I don't really see any differences now.
So tell us what balanced training is.
Okay, so balanced training is a way of developing a two-way conversation with a dog. Training basically comes down to a dog receiving information in a way they can understand. So in their language, in using both a leash and your body language. Dogs don't learn verbal commands as quickly and readily as we think they do. Mm-hmm. So most of us are raising, like maybe if we get them as a puppy, now they're getting older and we start talking to our dogs. We start saying sit, we start saying come, we start saying don't jump on that. We start saying get your feet off the counter. And it's, you know, humans are just funny this way. Like if you really sat us down and said, do you think they can really understand what you're saying? We'd probably end up saying, well, they should, but well, yeah, you're right. Probably not. Right. But we really have to start there and stop ourselves and say, wait a minute, that's English. And yes, I can teach my dogs English words. They're amazing and what they can learn, but I can't start there. And so training is so much more than a verbal request or command and then expecting you to respond to it because of the tone of my voice or the volume of my voice. Because in the end, that's not what leadership means. Leadership isn't loud. Leadership is quiet. Leadership isn't fast moving and big. It's slow moving and calm. Leadership and the communication of leadership there isn't even a sternness to it. It's just neutral. So it's neutral information that we can provide through a leash. And then as we teach verbal commands on top of it, we get the same response and understanding and compliance off the leash. But balanced training is called balanced because we use all of the types of communication. We use their language and layer on ours. We use positive reinforcement, but we use negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement sounds so warm and fuzzy that's where we want to land. And there's the argument for it is unbalanced because positive reinforcement comes from that same science, but they're ignoring the other parts of that science because they don't feel as good to us as humans. But it's really a disservice to our dogs to not give them all of the language that they need.
Well, let's bring on one of the guests, and maybe you can talk. We can start. You can explain how you started with this particular dog. Let's start with Spot. James.
Yeah, we'll start with James.
Yeah. Hi, James.
Hey, James.
And Spot. I'll give you a little bit of history of Spot. He was adopted. He's a hound, beagle hound. He was a young dog. He was adopted by a couple who screened very well. It's not easy to adopt from Crisis Dogs NC. And most of the time, 99% of the time, we like to think we do a very good job, and we do a good job, but there are certain things that happen with people we can't anticipate. We adopted to this North Carolina couple about a year late, and we keep our microchip on as secondary, always on secondary chip. And we got a call from a shelter in Florida, which said, "We have your dog." And roundabout, it turns out that this person moved to Florida, never told us, and the dog ended up in the shelter. We couldn't find the person. It was a complicated story. However, one of our team members happened to be driving up from Florida, brought Spot back. We put Spot into foster for evaluation, and then we found James Floyd, an amazing adopter. But James, tell us a little bit about the issues Spot had because Spot had been through a lot, and when he arrived with you at your house, what was happening with him?
Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry, I was introducing Spot earlier and didn't realize I was on mute. So Spot came to the house, and first few days he was kind of nervous, and he'd come from a foster. And the reports we've gotten out of him was, he was social, had a little bit of leash activity, but we didn't really know what to expect. We said he was leash trained, and he is. But when we got him, the first few walks were exhausting. If I'm being honest, that they were just, he's pulling and smelling and just all over the place and just constantly, just pulling on the leash. And he had a harness. He came with a harness, and he was just, as soon as the doors opened, he was gone. It was just a tug of war. And then you'd see a dog, and he would just go ballistic. And it was a bit embarrassing. It was just fatiguing. It was quite a bit fatiguing. And so I did that for a bit, probably 2-3 weeks, and then I called and said, "I got to find a trainer." And that's when you introduced me to Tracy. And then Tracy was booked, so it took us about 3-4 weeks to get in. And I was at my wit's end. So that's kind of where we were. Sweet dog inside the house, perfect dog. You open the door and it's Jekyll and Hyde, or it was. And so that's kind of where we were when we reached out to Tracy.
And let me just say also that for as much as we can evaluate a dog, which we did initially, this dog was through so much change. We don't know what happened in the adoptive home, ending up in Florida in the shelter, then a foster. So the behaviors when the dog finally lands can be different than what we have seen. So, I'll
say, I mean, he was as described. He was leash trained. You could put him on a leash; he didn't fight you. It was just all of that energy outside. So it wasn't. Don't take me wrong. It wasn't that what we got was different than we expected. It was just, you could tell he'd been through a few different places. Yeah.
So we connected. So Tracy, how did you get things under control and change?
So this is the most interesting part and the most surprising part for people when they come. I mostly train reactive dogs. It's just kind of the word has gotten out. That's probably why I'm so busy. And so it's very familiar to me. And first I try to help people understand what's going on. Dogs have inside brains and outside brains, and so to speak, and their inside brain isn't subject to all of the instincts that happen outside. So it's like a switch goes on. Now it's all about sight, smell, sounds, and those instincts to chase, hunt, and protect themselves. When a dog's on a leash, they can feel, we think of this as like, we're together, isn't this great? Well, when they go out into the world, they feel like, it's not so great, I'm restrained. I can't do what I normally do out here. First, I'm frustrated, and then I see another dog that I don't know, and they're approaching me, and I can't do my normal dog dance, like we know dogs do when they're off leash. So I'm pretty vulnerable right now. I can't run, I can't hide. So a lot of dogs, no matter really what their background is, I see the same amount of reactivity happen in dogs who've been with people since they were 8 weeks old. They hit that adolescent mark, that mid-adolescence, 1 year, 1.5 years, that's when most people come to me. And now their dogs are very reactive. So it's not just about what's formally happened to them. It can be sometimes, but it's often not. It's just that they don't have a sense of feeling safe. So the first thing we need to do is get them off that harness. And I know it's not, again, what our humanness wants, because if we're not understanding dog psychology and how they communicate in their own language, then, and we're just going with our human inclinations, then why wouldn't a harness be better? Because it certainly doesn't feel good to me to imagine something around my neck. First thing we need to know is that dogs are programmed, built, designed to communicate around the neck. Around the body is only restraint. So, and restraint has its purposes, right? In the car, out on a hike, going to the vet. So harnesses aren't wrong, or hurtful, they just can't communicate or teach or give a dog a sense of guidance. So the first thing we did, now Spot his new name was Dash, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So I know him more as Dash, but so Dash, first thing we did was get him on a slip lead. So slip lead is different. I guess I could even grab one. Is that it's
Well, she's doing that and everything. I was going to ask, because this is an amazing picture, how you managed to get this picture and to get such a calm picture of the dog, because the dog is so adorable in this picture and all along those lines. So I did get this picture from Judith, and I was like, this dog is being very calm and very mannerable and all in that kind of way. So I just
it's called burst photography, man.
Oh.
No, he was fine. He sat there.
So if I were to demonstrate, can you guys see Paris?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So if I were to demonstrate on Paris, if we get this around the neck.
Can you go closer in to see the to see Tracy, Mark, to see the leash thing?
Hold on a second. I'm going to drop everybody off, and I'll drop this off. We'll
Okay.
just give Tracy full screen.
Yeah, that's a slip lead. Tracy, do that again so we can see.
Okay, so it's designed with this tab as here, so I can slide it back so I can open it all the way to slip it over my dog's head. But then the important step is that I snug this up.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, he just thinks this is all about love time. I know. So then I snug this up so that it stays up high behind the ears. Now I say to all my clients, like, this is that spot around the neck. Is what I call Mama Dog Communication Central. So this is where Mama Dog carries them as puppies. This is where, when they get bigger and older, she takes them by the neck and steers them.
Oh, okay.
That's a very familiar and almost comforting sensation. And that stays with dogs all of their lives. I've put a slip lead on a 10-year-old dog who's been wearing a harness and pulling and reacting on it for years and years, and he immediately just relaxed. They remember it. So it's built in. It's snug enough to stay up, but I can still fit my hand under here. But now I have a way to do something more natural. Thank you, Paris. That's the perfect position. Show this. It's almost like he knew. So I can squeeze his neck and release it, and squeeze and release.
How much do you have to train the dog to deal with other family members? Because, like I said, when I started at the beginning, I was mentioning Millie, who, by the way, was a girl cat that they then discovered was a boy cat later on and everything. But that being said, how much do you have to acclimate them to other parts of the family, be it babies and other family members and other animals that might be in the house as well?
Yeah, definitely. It doesn't have to start with just one person, but there usually is one or two of the adults in the family doing most of the initial training to establish that relationship of leadership. And then once that is established, now you're in charge of the pack. So whether you bring in babies or grandparents or friends, you are bringing that into the pack. They trust your uh, your intelligence and your decision making around the safety of the pack. So they're going to have respect for those people. Now, without that kind of relationship with someone in the household as in charge, as the leader, they can very naturally be suspicious of new people coming in and act afraid or otherwise unwelcoming. And so that's why these steps are so important.
Okay, so the slip lead, and then what happens then?
Okay, so the slip lead then gives me a way to talk in their language, and we see it pretty immediately. I don't know if you remember that, James, that they go from, even when they come inside the studio, they're still usually pulling, and they're at the end of their leash on their harnesses. And then they just really quickly start to look up at me. They start to slow down and understand that they're now following someone. And that usually provides a lot of relief for a dog, because that is their most relaxed state, and the most valuable state is to have someone else be in charge, right? There are those few dogs that are programmed to be the lead dogs, and they're a little more complex, but in most cases, dogs are, if you prove that you are going to be in charge in their language in a benevolent leadership way, they're very happy to say, thank you, that's a relief, my life's easier now. And lose that sense of, I better bark at things, or I better bark at things coming in the house or outside, or when I go outside, the only thing that matters to me is hunting, you don't really matter. It just builds more of a relevance to the owners.
So then what happens next?
So then the next thing we're doing is reintroducing the crates. A lot of people have already been doing this, but a lot of people haven't, especially when it's an adult dog. They either become adults and we just stop using the crate, or they are adopted as young adults or adolescents and we don't think we need the crate. But the next thing on the next box we can help them check, as far as understanding if they're safe, if someone's in charge in the home, in their new environment, is to put them in the crate. So
okay, let me just take a pause here, and let's bring in Kevin Spalding, because we can take the next step with Kevin, hi Kevin, so we can move to the next step with
Kevin
adopted Major. You have Major with you?
Yeah, I do. He's being very good on his cot with his bone. Hey, buddies.
Go down a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, right.
Good boys.
And what was Major's issue when you adopted him? He came from, I believe he also was a shelter rescue.
Yes. So Major adopted him at 6 months. So he had a lot of that really kind of rowdy, adrenalized behavior. And on top of that, he had separation anxiety. So I had tried, kind of similar to James, kind of every way that I could think of, using Treach. We had the harness, which he would just end up biting the leash and stuff like that. And then about a month after I had him, called Tracy. I was like, hey, I could use some help. So similar thing when we started, first thing she did was put that slip lead on him and help him kind of walk through her studio. And you could see it almost immediately. He was like, goes from this really excitable dog to much more of a conversation going on between myself and him. So it was very cool.
Okay, so carrying on then from the slip lead, what do you do about the crate, Tracy? What did you do next for Major, which is basically what you did for Dash also?
Yeah. It is the next step for almost every dog, is now we're going to reacclimate them to the crate through leadership. So the leash is on, another thing most people don't think of. They just ask their dog to go in the crate. There's no authority to it. They're like, well, what if I don't? And so we just have that slip lead on. We come up with a word in your crate, whatever we want to use. I lead you in on the leash. I close the door. I open the door. I let tell you to come out. So now we repeat that several times so that we're there. We can break apart any prior association they may have with the crate, whether it's being left in there too long, or anything else, so that they understand, oh, this is safe. You're putting me in there to be safe, to rest, to take time off. And then we start slowly building the duration.
Okay,
So-
what do you, we hear from a lot of people. People have a very different reactions to crating. People think immediately, oh, I would never crate my dog.
Do you hear that? Yep.
All the time. And so how do you get past that? And what do you do when a dog is initially reactive to going into a crate, as probably many are?
Right. So first of all, I do make the comparison. Again, we're thinking human instead of dog. So dogs have dens. People don't have little holes that we rest in. So we would never put our child in a crate, but we have to understand the difference. So, and we can reestablish this. There are a couple of reasons dogs are reactive in the crates. And one of the first ones is that they think they're in charge of their situation. And so if we put them in the crate, they lose that ability to be in charge. But that's misinformation to that dog. So a lot of times they're reactive because they're like, how can I control everything around me if I'm in the crate? And like I said, also they've had, in a lot of cases, prior experiences to being in the shelter. They're left alone for hours and hours with something that's kind of similar with a barrier. So that can be a prior association, but we can soften that and rebuild it by doing this conditioning exercises, right? So I don't say, just go home, you just got to use the crate. There's no other way, and just put them in and ignore that they're fussing. That's not how it works.
How do you do that? How do you soften and make it a better experience?
Well, like I explained it, we're putting the leash on and we're leading them around the house to teach leadership, to teach, I lead, you follow, everything's calm, I'm in control, nothing to worry about, just follow me. And then part of that process says, and by the way, let's go in the crate for 4 seconds. Cool, good job, let's come back out. All right, let's walk around a little bit, let's go in for 4 minutes. I'm right here in the room, everything's fine, I'm calm. And then I get you back out, and then we just build on that until we've got an hour in the crate, and by then they're really sinking into their instincts again of, oh, rest, safety, and all of those things that dens do mean to dogs. Especially when you bring in a dog and we don't know the situation, or maybe we do, but in either case, just transitioning environments and situations and people, dogs need to decompress. And
So, Kevin, how did Major react when you started doing the crate?
Yeah. So before we started with Tracy, right, it was I would use kind of the Klong way of doing it, and he would do okay for like 5 minutes or so, and then get up and start barking and whining. So what I did with Tracy is we did kind of what she's talking about, right? Leash work around the house, and then we also did obedience in the crate. So I'd have Major, be in a down position for 15 minutes or so, and it really helped him realize, like Tracy was saying, one, it's a safe environment for him, and two, hey, this is what I'm asking you to do right now is to relax.
And what about James? What about you? How did Dash react?
He's actually pretty good. He initially didn't want to go in, and we did, leading him around, and then he was a little suspicious of it. And I think I don't know, Tracy, if this was your guidance or not, but I think we put a little treat in there after he got kind of get him in there, and just to know that it was okay for him to go in on the leash. And then he just started going in there. It was really nice. So he loved it, and we thought the crate was going to be too small. We thought like, oh, it's too small for him. It was per the guidance, the right. And he loves it, so he would just go in there and stay for a while.
Yeah, and that's not wrong at all to give them some, I call it a motivator. If they're suspicious of the crate, who knows why, past experience, who knows why, We do know that underneath that suspicion is a comfort that they can find from it. They just need to be reintroduced. And using the Kong with peanut butter in it or whatever you did, Kevin, and then a treat to remind them that this is a good space. I often also recommend to start out, okay, you've been doing these in and out of the crate throughout the day on the leash. Now, why don't you feed him his meal in the crate? That's another good way to start reminding them. Remember, this isn't new information. This isn't a stretch for them to like the crate because it's a den. So, but this is where you get fed. And yes, once you get that follow going around, you get some sits and some downs, and then you can ask them to go in the crate and do a sit for you while the door's open, they're still on leash, and they just start really connecting to it in a way that says, oh, this is more for my safety, so I can rest, I can be off duty. And that's the only way dogs can decompress also. So it's very important part of the process, especially when they first come in.
All right, let me ask you this. How did all this help, let's say, with Dash's reactivity to other dogs?
I mean, it really helped. I mean, so again, I don't want to speak for Tracy, but I felt like at times Tracy wasn't training the dog; she was training me.
Yeah.
How to manage. So it was just a bit of patience and a bit of just knowing how to communicate to him, and then just over time he would bark all the time. Then he would be a little less aggressive, and then just in the past 3 weeks, I've noticed there are times he just doesn't bark at all. He's just like, I don't care. So
well, how did Tracy? How did the preparation changed the reactivity?
So I love talking about this part, Jude. So thank you for asking, because it is the part that we wouldn't know unless you study dog psychology. So the reason that, and so first I'll start out by, I do understand, and my heart goes out to people who say, my dog's perfect in the house, but the reactivity outside, or often that includes when people come in or anything else that goes on, they can't handle it. And so I don't really care about sit and down and crate. I need this to be fixed. And knowing dog psychology, I have to say to them, I can't just fix that, because that's a mindset. That's a feeling. That's an emotion. That's whether it's fear-based or just being kind of dominance-based or whatever that it is. I can't change that in the moment. So there's no way to I just met your dog. Let's go out and see another dog. And I have a magic way to stop this, because that's not the case.
So what do you?
When I use that slip lead, which again, mama dog, that tells me moves towards the source of the pressure rather than pressure on the body on a harness says to their brain, move away from it. So that's my first step, to say, we have a two-way conversation. I'm leading you just like mama dog taught you. And then I say, and mama dog kept you safe. So what that's saying to them is, I will keep you safe in a time that they can absorb and process that familiar information and bring it back up from their primal brain and understanding. When I'm out and I see the dog and they're now barking, and as James said, it's true, they can go ballistic, right? It's not for anybody. And they're putting on the biggest show they can to be proactive. So that's not the time that we can say, hey, look, I'll protect you, right? They can't hear you. It's like I often say, in comparison, we can't teach kids math at recess. They can't hear you. So we create a classroom to teach kids math. And then lo and behold, they could do math at recess if they had to, right? Because now it's familiar, even though I'm excited. So that's why whatever the problems are, we have to start.
You start with the base.
When we can learn.
With that base, that makes sense. Just really quickly, what do you say about the dog parks? Because like I said, I live in a apartment complex, and I know that a lot of times people get very excited about those dog parks, but I also know that oftentimes they are various breeds of dogs that are on those dog parks. I sometimes think that they maybe need a time frame for the small dogs and the big dogs, because not all the times do they get along with each other and all in that space. But that's probably not
Because we
realistic and all in that space.
normally don't advise dog parks
Yep. You're right.
because there's too many variables. You don't know who's coming in. You don't know how. You don't know the dynamics.
Yeah. And I wish I could, because I do understand people that don't have yards and want their dogs to run around.
Yeah.
But I'll say a couple of things as briefly as possible about that. Is that you're right, Jude. There's too many things that can go wrong, and if they do, they're usually big. So it's a lot of people that use dog parks. It's because they can't walk their dogs, because they're crazy and pulling, and so that's not the dog that's going to have the best social skills with my dog. So that's one factor. And then it's really unrealistic to think that every day, 3 times a week, however time I go, that you can just be put in a situation where dogs are just filing in to this fenced area. They still know it's fenced. And I can only get away so far. And just when I start figuring out the relationship and like, can I play with this one dog, and how can I play? And now another dog runs up, right? And so there's so much tension. Even if we're looking at it, we see excitement. It's not just that, there's tension, right? Like, this just ran up behind me. Oh, I just heard a bunch of barking next to me. And I can't even really focus on what I was trying to get out of this socialization with this dog, because everything's just appearing. So it's just not, unfortunately, it's not practical. But the other thing I wanted to add is that I love when people have yards, but I'm equally content when people don't have yards, because now I know that those dogs are going to get walked. And because having a yard is valuable, ball throwing, things like that. But if you just use it as go out and get your exercise, well, you've really lost the opportunity of that part of the relationship, that even fun comes from me. So now I become more and more important to you. My dogs, I've always had yards. I've been fortunate, but if I put my dogs out there right now, beautiful day, without me, they would just stand at this glass and look inside and say, well, what's the point without you? Like, they literally would just stand there and wait for you to let them back in. So I want that, I want that relationship, and that meaning. And so, and not all dogs need to run all day long. They just need, if you don't have a yard, but you walk your dog, and you do at least those 30 minutes a couple times a day. And then once in the morning, once at night, you have a little play session in the house and just sitting on the rug with a toy. Like, that's fine.
Well, you said something to me very early on. You said training helps bonding and helps your relationship. So, we always encourage, and in our contract and in our discussions with adopters, we always advise training. And I have to say, not many people do it. And then they come back to us with, blah, blah, blah. And then we say it again. And then finally, when they do go to you,
it's pretty miraculous.
Yeah.
It's why I keep going. It's why, despite the sad stories coming in and the frustrations, and why I haven't taken a day off in 6 years, is because I stopped being surprised at the turnaround and the like, oh my gosh, did you switch dogs on me? How could my dog suddenly be calm like this and listen?
Right.
I've never stopped being thrilled by it. And
it sounds like it. Speaking of which, Tracy, you mentioned it earlier, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about it, because it seems like a lot of neighborhoods, the canine dogs, and I know that that is the dogs that are part of the police force, and in some cases even the fire force as well, are almost a part of the neighborhood. I know that here in North Carolina there have been several that have retired, and they are almost being treated as heroes, including some that passed away in the line of duty. So I just wonder if you could speak to that whole notion of the canine dogs, particularly those that are on the law enforcement side, being not just their owners' pets, but in many ways the community's ambassadors and all in that space. Because it seems like you've done some training work in that field.
I have, and I've worked a lot with herding dogs. I rescued my way back right after my first dog, the only one I had from a puppy. Every other dog I've adopted at a young or adolescence or older. I rescued 2 feral herding dogs. And so I got into that and sheep herding. And what I just saw was that these are special dogs. They do need to have a level of intelligence to be, to go into war zones, to be out on a sheep field and do their work, and being willing to override their level of comfort. Right. So we know that about them. But but those dogs still need leadership. It's just not, they don't just step in and go, oh, I want to be a police dog. I always wanted to be a police dog. So just put my vest on and I'm ready to go. Because if we don't then say this happens on the sheep field as well as, which I have been on, and in the police thing, which I haven't experienced firsthand, but I used to go watch them train the police dogs at Dorothea Dix Park when they were training there for several months. So I think I can speak a little bit to it. It's like, if they didn't say to that dog, great, I'm glad you have all this confidence and talent and willingness, but if I'm not your boss, then you're your own boss and you don't know how to make those decisions in a human world. So even in that case, they teach them to bite, they have to teach them to stop biting, right? Those dogs can't make those decisions on their own. On the sheep field, the dogs know their job is to move the sheep in a certain direction to keep the sheep together. One sheep goes off, they're very committed to bringing that sheep back in, but they also have to understand, but you can't bite the sheep and you've got to just do it through the work. And so without a human handler, things would go awry. So they're not magical and not needing the same things that any dog needs. Mm-hmm. And can a beagle, could Dash be a police dog? Probably not. I don't think we could teach him to bite, but Major.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure my brother's grandparent niece would not be a good police dog. Because
right.
That was an interesting conversation, because I know when we were going up to visit Mom on her birthday and also celebrate Mother's Day because they're near each other, the dog could also change the tire. So when the car kind of had that crash and everything, my younger brother had to take the dog back home as the car got towed. So the dog needed to go back home because it was too much of a hassle and all that going back and forth. So Malik, my younger brother, went back home with the dog and then eventually made it back to the house that we were all going to go. I think the dog actually stayed home because it was too much going back and forth.
I spent a day in Siler City with Tar Heel training, and they do train the police dogs there. One of the facilities that does it, and I went to interview to do a internship there. Ended up choosing something else, but I got to see, and those dogs were still using slip leads and crates and being led around and in and out of the crate and sit and down, and I mean they do need the same foundation work. So that's the thing I want to impress upon people, and also that we do tend to think that we're limited in what we can get from our dogs, but actually, if you're willing to open this conversation in a way that they understand you, respect you, in addition to just loving you, it's really a wonderful thing. So training isn't like, oh gosh, I've got to train like I have to clean the house. It's like, no, it's really rewarding and fun. And let's let Kevin and James speak about that. Like, what have you gotten out of the training? Either of you.
Kevin? Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it really showed me more about myself that I could not have gathered from just human to human interaction. I got to be honest. Like, it really does showed me how to be a leader. And I think Tracy is pretty good at focusing on, being a leader is not about raising your voice. It's not about, it's not even about having your dog listen every time you ask them to do something, because there's so many environments or whatever. It's about, what are you showing your dog the path in everyday life, right? You're your dog's, Tracy, you used this term before, CEO, right? Like, hey, here's what I want for you. And before you do it, you're kind of like, I don't, it kind of sounds a little weird, it doesn't really make any sense. And then you start doing it, you're like, the dog really buys into the work. And the work isn't necessarily have to be herding or police dogs, which is funny. I was just thinking, Tracy, I read a book and they were talking about the training of the dog. And I was like, God, we do a lot of that with Major. But it is funny. The dog buys into that work of everyday routine, what goes on the weekends, like if I'm just trying to think, if we go for 6-mile hikes on the weekend, Major buys in the work I'm asking for him there. If it's a slower day and I have to work a lot and, I only have time for 2 walks, Major knows, oh, that's the type of day it is. And
that's the work, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And James, what did you find about it in training that it showed something to you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's what it showed to me, but I tell you what it gave me is just
what it gave. Yeah,
it just gave me joy in having Dash around. I mean, honestly, the first few months I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. And I know I'm committed to it.
Yeah,
that's a lot to ask. And so he's become a bunch more enjoyable dog, and part of the family now. And his personality's coming out, and he's responding, and he's there with us versus it just being us, letting him roam. So it's made that much more enjoyable. I think, Kevin, you mentioned this. I hadn't realized it, but that part of what was it you said? Anyway, the walks have gotten where you just I lost the train of thought. But yeah, I mean, just the joy of engaging with him and seeing him react to us and be present, and also you get feedback from people in the community. So we're in a pretty common, familiar community, a lot of dogs here. And so people come by like, man, he's really gotten a lot better. And so you get that kind of feedback, which is fantastic.
Well, we have to wrap up. We only have a couple of minutes left. So we can take a look at both. We can see Dash and Major. Take a look at Dash and Major. One last look.
He's asleep.
Hard to see, yeah.
I think Kevin said he's kind of adopted. He's adapted to the days today.
Yeah. And I just want to say also that if anyone is interested in Tracy, if she can be, just contact us, Crisis Dogs NC, and we're on the internet and all social media. And if you're not in the Raleigh area, Tracy can make recommendations for trainers in other areas in North Carolina. But we urge you, really, not only it's an enjoyable experience, but it will save the life of your dog.
Yeah. And if we do have just another minute, I'd like to kind of pull it together to. I use this in my presentation.
We really can't see that though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I'll just read it then. Really the thing that surprises people the most, but is the most useful and is the biggest thing that you can understand that will help you and your dog is that when I ask people what they think that their dogs, young or older, value and need the most, everyone says to me as they start raising,
I don't have a new one.
Affection, play,
But I can
freedom.
I can use that one.
Right? That's not true. Is that on the list of what they need and value? Yes. but it falls below the more important priorities for your dog. And sorry if you can't read it, but what they actually value and need the most is safety, work, leadership, and structure.
Yes.
So after that, then give the affection the play. Of course, that balances everything out. But this is what they want first, especially an older dog gone through things, coming into a new home. They need more direction, less affection. They don't need your affection first. They know they're getting affection just because you brought them to a safe space. They need structure. They need a sense of work. They need to understand your leadership. And then the other things can fall in.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Really, I just rescued a few months ago a border collie puppy that was literally put into my arms. And I did not expect to have a puppy. But what you said has really helped redirect me, because this dog has a lot of energy.
Glad.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay, so Mark, thank you for inviting us. Thank you, Kevin and James. And I guess next week we'll pick up another topic.
All right, that sounds
Yep,
wonderful.
glad to have y'all back
Thank you.
on
Appreciate
and
it.
have the first side chat going again and everything. And I'm actually rolling how folks can reach you, and also how they can reach at least some of the ways that they can reach Tracy as well. So definitely they can see that rolling across and all in that span and everything. So definitely, hopefully folks will be reaching out to y'all and all in that way. Pod TV is an international network, so who knows, you might even get some calls from people trying to figure out about dog care in India, Australia, or definitely some of the other countries that
we work with
about
pilots
this
and cars,
show
we
as
can't
well. So
fly
we
out
definitely
of
have
the
a lot
US.
of who knows where the listeners may be coming from.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you again, everyone.
Guys, have a wonderful Sunday.
You too.
Bye. Thanks,
Bye.
James, for being here.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Appreciate you. And we'll actually end with a quick commercial, and then we'll go into our other show, which is after this. So we'll hear about Can Do Spices, and then we'll go into our Latin show right after that. But let's check out Can Do Spices.
You know how people love to enjoy food and don't understand how to flavor their food or how to replicate a meal? They're interested in supplements but don't know where to begin? Well, what I do is I take the guesswork out of enjoying flavor and wellness with my flavorful spice blends so that they can create delicious meals with healing benefits. Can Do Spice was created to help cooks at any level enjoy healing through food. Every spice blend was designed to give added health benefits of natural herbs. Every blend is complete. There's no need to add any additional spice for a delicious meal. Saving you time and money while adding supplements to your meals can be both tasty and fun. My earliest memories in the kitchen began with my father, Kenny Can Do Bond, so it was fitting that I would name this line after him. I have always looked to natural remedies to supplement the body, and I found myself hiding herbs and minerals in foods for my family. That's when it hit me. Everyone needs Can Do Spice. Everyone should be having this. It's an exclusive brand for cooks at any level who want to create flavorful dishes with healing benefits that can satisfy the body and soul. Add a little spice to your life. Give Can Do Spice a try.